They are the synagogue of Satan, and one day they'll bow before you. Jesus, I don't think you can say stuff like that. Hi, my name's Corey, and we're going through the book of Revelation together right now, unpacking these strange images and references, and this video is a bit of a doozy. Jesus straight up calls the Jewish community in the ancient city of Philadelphia a synagogue of Satan, and then he predicts that one day they'll all bow down to his followers. So what's the deal with that? Well, to understand Jesus' message to the Christians living in Philadelphia, recorded in the book of Revelation, you first need to know something about the city itself. It was situated at the base of a mountain, and it was subject to frequent earthquakes. So many that the people who lived there would say that they saw new cracks in the buildings every single day. But about 50 years before the writing of Revelation, there was an earthquake that was so devastating in Philadelphia that temples and large buildings were completely destroyed. It was so bad that the Roman emperor had to send aid and enrolled them in a relief program for 5 years while they rebuilt. The point is, they knew what it meant to suffer trials and tribulations, and they knew how those challenges revealed true integrity and strength. New Testament scholar N.T. Wright points out that though it's likely that while the large temples and buildings were destroyed, the smaller homes on the outskirts of the city that belonged to farmers and poor citizens, they weren't nearly as badly damaged. And that sets up the building image that permeates Jesus' message to the Christians living in Philadelphia, including the synagogue comment. Here's what he says. To the angel of the church in Philadelphia, write, these are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. I know your deeds. See, I've placed before you an open door that no one can shut. I know that you have little strength, yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. You see, currently, the Christians in Philadelphia were in a weak state. They had little strength. They were small in number. There wasn't many of them, but they were holding on, not cracking under the pressure to compromise on Jesus' commands or violate their Christian values, especially not in the face of pressure from much larger religious organizations like the Jewish community in Philadelphia. The scenario isn't, a church on one corner and the synagogue on the other. The church probably had less than 50 people, and the Jewish community was probably in the couple thousands. And that's where the language here gets tense. I will make those who are of the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews, though they are not, but are liars. When Jesus talks about those who say they are Jews but are not, he's asserting that a true follower of Judaism would have accepted that he was the Messiah. And since these assemblies of Jewish folks in Philadelphia don't accept him and instead persecute his followers, they're deemed to be false adherents of Judaism in Jesus' eyes. He then calls them synagogues of Satan, referring to those assemblies who were ratting out Christians to the Roman government to be arrested for not participating in the religious cults. A synagogue here doesn't refer to the actual Jewish house of worship, but it's just a generic term that references an assembly of people. It's a gathering. And the name, Satan, literally means the accuser. So they've become assemblies of accusation, hence synagogue of Satan. Then Jesus says, I will make them come and fall down at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you. This is a reference to the messianic motif that goes throughout the entire Old Testament, that at the end of the age, when the kingdom of God comes in its fullness, there's going to be this great reckoning where the people who rejected God will be required to acknowledge the error of their ways in front of God's people. But that's not all that Jesus is promising to them. He also says, since you have kept my command to endure patiently, I will also keep you from the hour of trial that's going to come on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. In light of their earthquake history, the image here is very vivid for them. The point that Jesus is making is that keeping his command will mean that when the trials and tribulations come and the temples and the big buildings crack and crumble and fall, you'll remain standing. Your integrity and strength will shine through. He finishes by saying, I am coming soon. Hold on to what you have so that no one will take your crown. The one who is victorious, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will they leave it. You see, there's that building motif again. You're being built into the kind of building that can withstand anything that this existence has to throw at it. I will write on them the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God, and I will also write on them my new name. Look, this is going to come up later in Revelation again, but there's a contrast that's going on here between the markings of Jesus and the markings of the beast, but we'll get to that in a future video. So what's the point here? Did Jesus utter some hate speech? Well, I'll let you decide, but I think it's important to understand the context. Jesus is trying to fortify this tiny community of followers who are living in a city that are literally trying to stamp them out. They're small, but size isn't what matters here. It's really about their integrity. It's their commitment. It's their faithfulness to the teachings of Jesus. Jesus' message to them is simply this: yes, trials will come, but your commitment to my teaching will allow you to come out the other side as a pillar in the new thing that I'm building, and everyone else will bow down in recognition. What about us? What do we take from this? I think one thing we can take from this is that the size of your church is not evidence of the strength of your faith. Commitment to the commands of Jesus is. Especially when it comes to where I live. While the average church attendance around most churches is about 50 people, what gets the most attention is large churches and big personality pastors. There's an entire ethos around the idea that if you're healthy, you're growing numerically. And I don't totally discount that, but it's not really a good metric according to Jesus. Drawing a large crowd isn't a sign that you're a faithful church. Being a people who are committed to the way of Jesus does. And those aren't necessarily different, but they're definitely not the same either. Secondly, if you're a follower of Jesus, you're being invited to walk through the door that only He can open, to be included as a pillar in the new world that He will make. And I think that's an incredible invitation. One of the New Testament authors wrote that the fruit of receiving that invitation would result in more love and joy, peace and patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. In other words, this new thing that Jesus will build is a place where everything is as it ought to be, where everything that you look at and think, man, that's not the way it's supposed to be, that's not the way it's supposed to be, that's not the way it's supposed to be, that's not the way it's supposed to be. All of that will be made right. Even if you're not sure you believe any of this is true, isn't there a part of you that hopes that it is? Stay committed to His command, to love one another as He has loved you. It's interesting, when the earthquakes of life come, Jesus' promise here became a well of strength for the Christians in Philadelphia to draw on, so that when everything around them was crumbling, that they were still able to stand. And I wonder if it could do the same for you. What do you think? Let me know. What does Jesus' message to Philadelphia mean for you? What ideas does this bring up for you? And hey, before you go and click out of this video, click subscribe if you liked it.